there, and welcome back to the Fixing Football podcast. You've got me and Scott again, unfortunately. Martin is still on... I don't know if you can have paternity leave from a hobby podcast, but that is what he's doing. Yeah. Parker, now a week old Scott, all well?
He is, yeah. I actually went to see him today, which was nice. Met my new nephew for the first time, and he's definitely a baby. He lies there, doesn't say much, and shits every now and again. So, yeah. But everyone's happy, everyone's healthy, and yeah, a lovely addition to the family.
So, that's good to hear. Only took you a week. That's good to hear, Scott. So, well done. Well done on that. And your enthusiasm there for your new nephew. That's brilliant to hear. Scott, you're probably one of the handful of people, I would say, in the world that have known Martin longer than me. Out of 10, how gutted do you think Martin was that the podcast went relatively smoothly last week?
I think you hit the nail on the head last week about his role as the beleaguered podcast owner, driver, whatever he likes to think of it. And I think on the one hand, he'd have been happy with how little editing he would have needed to do, but he loves a chance to beat us over the head with
God, yeah. So. He would have loved to dig in on us. And the only hiccup worth pointing out to the listener was that Martin forgot to give me admin rights to record the podcast. So the actual only mess up across this whole paternity break, which has been going on for about 6 months, he's been banging on about this.
Yeah,
was his error. So it's good that that's on the record.
Agreed.
How have you been, Scott? What have you been up to?
Not so much, mate. It's been had a few late nights up watching the Club World Cup as it happens. The first few games kind of sucked me in, and now I've been tracking what's been going on. And there's been some good games, to be fair.
Good.
So yeah, I've actually been spending my free time, as you'll be happy to hear, with a bit of football.
Yeah, good. I mean, we get to the football later, Scott, so maybe don't jump straight into the Club World Cup now, because there's very little going on in football other than that. So let's not cover that in this first bit. But yeah, similar, to be fair. I did find a bit of an interaction this morning, though. I've been sorting my house out, different background for those who noticing. I'm getting my house ready to go on the market if anyone's looking for a 3-bedroom house in Horwich. But I went to the gym this morning. I went to the sauna afterwards, and I don't keep up with the news. I think people think that I do. I think people think that I'm like some kind of like super politically motivated guy. I'm not. Like I barely check the news now. Really not interested. So I get in, and within 5 seconds of sitting down, there's two blokes having a discussion, and I get asked, and this is what time am I thinking here? 9:10 this morning in the sauna. Two blokes.
Oh God.
What do you think, mate? Do you think 9/11 was an inside job?
Oh, for God's sake!
And then
what gym was this?
Where was this? Total Fitness in Bolton. If you want to get stuck into, if you like your conspiracy theories, 9:10 in the morning on Sunday, conspiracy theories. I would expect to be maybe in someone's kitchen for that, maybe rather than in the sauna or Total Fitness. But yeah, it was an interesting one. For those who are interested in my reply, it was the same. It'd be some inside job for that to be an inside job. It's always been my view on that conspiracy. Scott, we're not going down that rabbit hole. So,
yeah, football. I don't think that's the kind of podcast we want to become. I don't think we want to go down that road.
We have been looking for a shtick, as they say, don't they? I don't know what it means, shtick. You say that, don't you? You say it like an SCH, don't you? I don't know why.
Yeah.
But we've been looking for that. But maybe conspiracy theories could be it. But I don't believe in any of them, so I'm shocked.
Yeah, you just come on and be like, well, these are all bullshit anyway. They'd be very short podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. Just like, why? Just why would they do that? Why would they lie to us that the Earth is round? What does that achieve?
I don't know. I have thought this, and I do wonder why people care so much. Like, if the Earth turned out not to be round in some strange turn of events, does it matter? Does anyone really give a shit if it's a triangle?
Well, that's what I mean.
I don't care.
What does it? What they hide? What does it hide? That information?
I don't know.
No one's.
I feel like it's in a religious debate, and that's again also not the kind of podcast that we strive to be.
No, fair. So there we are. Enough of that. So football.
How did you answer though? But before you do move on to that, how did you answer them? By the way, these two lovely gentlemen in the sauna.
Well, I answered with sort of a jokey, well, be some inside job, literally 2 planes crashing into buildings would be something quite dramatic to be able to organise and pull off as a cover up to go to war. When really, who would stop Western powers from going to war anyway? Exactly. So something on those lines. But then it moved on quickly to obviously the current global political crisis in the Middle East, and I then left and went and got in the jacuzzi because I just needed a bit of space. I wasn't ready for that kind of conversation this morning.
I think that was a wise move. Get out of Dodge. Yeah. You don't really want to be getting sucked into that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So football, Scott. Football. So before we'll start to talk about the Club World Cup maybe later on in the second half, and I've got some thoughts about my own team, Bolton. So we'll come to football a little bit, but the topic was it's something we touched on before, but I thought we'd go into it in a little bit more detail because I think this week's going to be quite critical for this potentially, and it's Crystal Palace in Europe, which I know we've talked about, but I don't think is getting anywhere near the kind of attention that I think it should be getting. When a team essentially could not, like Crystal Palace, not perform in Europe. Now, before we sort of get into what's going on and where things are up to, Scott, I just wanted to get your feelings on it and how you feel about this situation.
I kind of agree. I think you touched on it there. It's not getting covered all that much. Like when you look it up, I think the last article I could find was like 4 days ago. And it's like, I'd have thought someone should be like hot on this issue and really reporting it. Because like you said, it was a massive deal that Palace won a trophy in the first place. And now the fact that they're in European competition, which I'm not a big Palace history of, that might be the first time in their entire history they've been in a European competition.
It would be the first time ever in Europe, yeah.
And they've the real risk of being kicked out. I mean, by all accounts, they've already missed a key deadline to get this kind of stuff sorted out. So yeah, I'm genuinely surprised. It'd be a bit of an emotional roller coaster to be a Palace fan the last month or two. You've had the fucking massive peak and the massive high of beating City in the cup final, to now the big reward that comes of that, not just the trophy, all the rewards of Europe and all the glamour that comes with that might just get ripped away from you because rich people just want to do rich people things and just buy every football club under the sun. It's crazy.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I do agree. I think there's two sides to this. I think there's the actual issue itself of multi-club ownership, which we'll touch on in a minute, and whether the rules are fair and whether they should be enforced like they are being. But then I think the side thing is just Palace fans aren't Bob. Like that's a completely separate thing in itself, isn't it? Like I can relate to that feeling. Obviously, we had our period in the 2000s of qualifying for Europe. We will not do that again, or at least not for unless there's a massive shift in what's going on at the club. Yeah. So those years were so important to us. They were, those European campaigns, those two of them that we had were everything.
Yeah.
So now, granted, we didn't win a cup, so we didn't have that moment. But we beat Atletico Madrid, drew with Bayern. Those nights, they'll live with me forever. So absolutely. The idea of that not happening because of theoretically bureaucracy, which is what it is, again, we'll get into the rules in a moment, but it must sting, and it must, even if all gets sorted, it must have taken the shine off it a little bit.
I think so. And like you said, these are the kind of things that, as a fan, this is what you live for. You live for the trips to Wembley, the times that you might get to see your team lift a trophy, those glorious nights in Europe or whatever it may be. And you've gone through the ringer as a Palace fan. I've never seen, some Palace fans have had a whole life, lived and died, and never seen anything like it. And now, you're on the cusp of that now just being ripped away from you. So it's a tricky one. It's a very tricky one. I'm hopeful that it gets resolved, but from what I've been reading, I don't think it's looking very good.
Well, there's a lot going on, which is why I think it's good to touch on it. Because I think whenever we've talked about it, we've talked about it more at a higher level without really getting into the details. So I think let's first of all talk about why this is happening. So we've skirted around, but for those that don't know, why are Crystal Palace potentially being excluded from European competition this year, Scott?
So Crystal Palace, they have the unfortunate coincidence, if that's a word that you want to call it, that one of their key stakeholders in the Palace ownership group also has a very large stake in Lyon. Now, the problem is Lyon have also qualified for the Europa League. And by current UEFA rules, you cannot have, as an ownership group or person, cannot have two clubs competing in the same competition because it's an enormous conflict of interest, or at least it's a very, very murky area that you don't want to be getting in.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's all in terms of, it's a very simple explanation. You've got Lyon and Palace owned by the same people in the same competition, and UEFA have said absolutely no way.
Correct. And the reason it's Palace that are potentially in trouble, not Lyon, is because of league position finish, which is what UEFA deem.
Is that what it comes down to? Is that like the deciding factor?
Yeah, that's why it's Palace, not Lyon. It's not previous seasons. It's to do with the fact that they finished higher in their domestic league, which is France, obviously. So they were playing on like co-pat fields and stuff like that. But whatever, that's the rules. So yeah, it's to do with John Textor, particularly the owner, who also owns Botafogo. Well, he does. Yes, which we'll talk at the Club World Cup later. A team doing quite well in it, actually. But yeah, he has a 45% share in Crystal Palace, which is the issue, because I believe it's 31%. You're not allowed to own more than that to have competing clubs in Europe, and he owns significantly more than that. Now, Palace believe that they should be exempt from this rule, Scott, and the reason is because of the structure of how Crystal Palace is set up. So I believe you've got Textor and another ownership group with the Reuben brothers, who also own 45%, and then Steve Parish, who owns 10%, but they all have equal voting rights, I believe.
Yeah. There's something, I think the way that they are trying to wiggle around this is the fact their whole claim is built around that John Textor can't make the decisions as a majority, therefore he isn't the majority shareholder, and ergo it's not a conflict in there. It sounds very loose, if you ask me. I'm no lawyer, but it sounds like they're clutching at straws a little bit.
My understanding, and again, I could be wrong, but my understanding is it's similar to the setup at Man United with Ratcliffe, where Ratcliffe owns a minority stake and Steve Parish owns a minority stake in Palace, but he is the controlling director. So he has the super rights, if you would. I think that is the correct term, the super voting rights. That means that he ultimately has control. So you're quite right that Palace's argument is that John Textor doesn't have a controlling stake or even an influence, essentially. So
that's another. I guess that's a grey area. How do you measure how much influence somebody has? I mean, you can do it maybe by shares, but yeah, I think it's murky. I think it's a very murky one.
Well, that takes us nicely on to the next point. So you quite rightly talked about a missed deadline. So what was that, Scott?
So the missed deadline, it was to do with, I believe it's to do with, they had to report in this issue to UEFA, I believe, and effectively file a plan to sort it out, or a file for, that's what it was. It was, they had to file for like a change in ownership to basically restructure the ownership model of the club so that Textor was basically dropped down here and the other guys started to move up the chain. So his stake then didn't really matter, but they've totally shit the bed on that by the sounds of it.
Yeah. So essentially the workaround that most clubs do for this kind of thing is to shift owners' rights into a blind trust.
Yeah.
Which is similar to what you've seen at Nottingham Forest. In fact, he's actually gone out of that now because they dropped into the Conference League and he didn't realise that he needed it. So it's no longer in a blind trust at Nottingham Forest. But essentially you could put your shares into a blind trust, similar to what Tottenham is currently at the moment. And essentially it is a management company that manages it. And that owner theoretically is insulated away from controlling that trust. So cannot manage it, cannot control it, cannot influence it, but that money is protected. So
yeah,
that's been the workaround. But there is a deadline of March the 1st for the following season. And this, go on, sorry, go on.
No, I'm just thinking it's a tricky one, that isn't it? Because it's all well and good. I mean, I'm guilty of saying, "Oh well, they fucked up there." I see this in two ways because on March the 1st, I don't think Palace would have known they'd be winning the FA Cup at that point.
I agree.
But also, the businesses, large businesses, like most football clubs are now, it's usually someone's job to have contingency plans in place for worst case scenarios, like disaster insurance. It's that sort of. It's usually typically someone's job to think of this kind of stuff. So I'd be interested. I'd love to be a fly on the wall at Palace and see what the internal feeling is as to who's dropped the ball. Has anybody even dropped the ball? But I think maybe somebody has.
Well, that's a really interesting point. And a couple things here. So I completely agree. I think the issue with qualification through winning the FA Cup is that it makes it hard to plan. So Nottingham Forest, for example, probably had no consideration they were going to be in Europe next season.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But by March the 1st, we were arguing about whether they were going to be finishing the Champions League or not. So they were then able to potentially see the issues down the line. They were almost guaranteed. No, not guaranteed, but they were very likely to get into Europe, I would say, by February time this year.
Yeah, exactly.
So they were able to do the contingency plans. I think an interesting point with Palace is that they've had not ownership issues, but there has been conflict at board level at that club for quite some time. And both the Rubens and Textor have vied for full control of Palace because they're frustrated with the current situation. They want more control. They want more influence at the club.
Textor's name's been in the news well before this because I think was he looking to sell and buy a stake in Everton?
He wanted to buy Everton. Yeah.
Oh, buy the whole thing out.
Yeah, you're exactly right. He wanted to sell his stake in Palace because you can't own a stake in two in the same competition as we're discussing at length here. So he wanted to sell his stake at Crystal Palace to buy Everton, or alternatively to buy a controlling stake at Palace. He was vying for both options, and neither developed really.
Yeah, so it's not exactly a paragon of stability at Crystal Palace, is it, in the boardroom?
No, I mean it's someone that we've talked about a lot. We're not a podcast that has many common themes other than Nottingham Forest do our head in, and Ipswich. No, Burnley fans can be quite touchy as well. Yeah. Luton, they were touchy, but John Textor is someone that we've mentioned quite a lot on this podcast, talking about a number of different things. So. Yeah, he is front and center of all this, really. But the irony is that he's trying to pretend that he's not, isn't it?
I think, he seems like he's trying to come out in the wash, in public at least, in the most favourable way. But it's one of those things, isn't it? If you come across 10 dickheads in one day, it's probably you, isn't it? I think that the same kind of logic's applying here.
Yeah. So, how can this be sorted? So there's a few things going on. Kind of talked a little bit about fly on the wall stuff. Palace are linked with a sale of this, potentially selling the stake or potentially the whole club to, unfortunately, another American owner, Woody Johnson, who is the owner of the New York Jets.
I wanted to ask you about Woody Johnson. Particular, I don't know if have you seen a picture of this man?
No, I've seen a picture. I saw it when I was reading up. This is maybe a couple of weeks ago when we touched on it the first time. I couldn't believe it was called Woody Johnson, number one. I thought, that's the
most American man. And two names very unfortunately associated with a particular part of the human anatomy, which we don't need to get into. So,
what's Woody his name, or is it short for something?
I don't. Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if Woody is like an actual American name or it's like.
I will look at that, Scott, while you carry on. Sorry, go on.
No, as soon as I saw who they were looking to sell into, I thought Woody Johnson. I was like, if this guy's not American, then I've got a full head of hair. Like, it would be absolutely incredible.
Oh yeah, I've seen pictures of him now. Oh
yeah. Have you seen him with these?
Go on.
Have you seen the one with these diamond encrusted Woody chain? It looks like
I'm looking at 4 pictures of him. 2 of them have the American flag behind him.
Yeah. If you keep scrolling. Is like pitch side at the Jets, and he's got a huge diamond encrusted chain that says Woody. And I'm like, you know what? I kind of, one hand, I think you're a prick, but I also kind of rate how obnoxious he is.
Okay.
I think he's like 83 years old.
He was just so he was linked with buying Chelsea. He was one of right. Okay, I think I remember this actually. Yeah, he was quite close to Chelsea, wasn't he?
He was. Well, he was actually in my research. He was also the United States ambassador to the UK for quite a long time.
Yeah, he was.
Which I think where the all the American flag pictures come from, they're probably his old LinkedIn photos. But yeah, he's been around the scene for a while. He's getting to the case with a lot of these Americans, isn't it? That are buying into, owners of NBA teams and NFL teams. They tend to sniff around the Premier League at least once, so the names start to stick because you've read it somewhere and they've come close to. I'm sure there'll probably be someone who's bought Bournemouth whose name I'd probably recognise from it.
Which NBA was it? Is it the Lakers this year that went for 10 billion? Was it Lakers?
Yeah, two. Funnily enough, a guy who's part of Clear Lake, so they're somewhat connected to the mighty Chelsea. One of the guys in Bowley's camp of Clear Lake, he bought it for $10 billion, which I think is the biggest sports team sale in history.
Oh yeah, I think before that was it Dallas Cowboys. I think they were about 7 or 8 billion. Was it?
Yeah, it's fucking. You're talking. He started to get into obscene amounts of money, and the Cowboys are a crazy big franchise, which you don't realize if you're not an NFL person, but they're just absolutely fucking enormous.
I mean, with these sorts of numbers, it tells you why that these businessmen are interested in British football clubs, because even the top clubs, you're still getting them significantly less than that. I mean the purchase of Ratcliffe's purchase of United put that valued at around 6.5-7 billion if you bought the 100%. So and that is Man United. That's not, what I mean. It's not Crystal Palace.
That's the club. Well, it's funnily enough. I was looking at what this potential sale of at least Textor's stake is looking in the. I've seen a few conflicting figures, but it seems to be rounding at about $200 million. Yeah, I think like you said, he's got between about 30% of the shares ish, something like that.
Yeah.
So you then think you can buy a whole Premier League club in London, established, great fan base, now FA Cup winners and European giants, soon to be Crystal Palace, for what, $500 million, which to these guys is just chump change.
Yeah, exactly. And it's such a marketable thing. Palace has got lots going on. Like you say, it's London club. They've got a massive catchment area for a London club as well. There's not many clubs around them, which is very weird for a London club. But Palace have quite a big catchment area in terms of their academy, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on with some players being linked with moves like Mark Gay. So we'll talk about that a little bit in the second half. But yeah, it's got a lot going for it. So 400 million. I mean, don't get me wrong, this is a club that nearly went bust 10, 15 years ago. I remember that very well.
It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah,
I remember that. Was it that when Simon Jordan was owner?
I think just after, yeah. Just after.
Yeah.
But I remember they had the administration in the Championship. I think Dougie Friedman might have been manager then. I remember all that. But no, it's interesting times. But yeah, it looks like that is the best hope. But I think there's going to be decisions on this in the next couple of weeks. But I think we'll just have to wait and see, really, Scott.
Yeah, it's one thing I was reading. I don't know if you can fix all these legal problems beforehand, but you still got to pass his Premier League ownership test, which he will do because he's got 10 billion in the bank. I'm sure they're not concerned about his.
Oh, he seems like a pretty serious person. Like those flag pictures, they look very serious person pictures.
I hope he wears his diamond Woody chain to every meeting and every Palace home game.
But does it say Woody? Is that what it says?
Literally just says Woody in diamonds. It's fucking great. You've got to see it.
Like G Unit.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll watch out for that then.
But I was reading, it takes at least 2 or 3 months for that to go through with the Premier League. But I don't know if you've signed the contracts, I guess, but I don't know what UEFA would say, because they could say, well, he might fail it. He won't, but until it's signed off, it ain't signed off, is it? So
that kind of stuff, that's what solicitors are there for.
I guess so, yeah.
That's what solicitors are there for. Also, 2 more things, and we'll move on. If they do get kicked out, they can't go in the Conference League. It's just that or
Yeah.
nothing. And that will mean that Nottingham Forest go into the Europa League.
Oh,
And
really? Right.
yeah.
Okay.
So Nottingham Forest will be promoted into the Europa League, and I don't know what happens with that Conference League. I think it will go to the Brighton actually, who are the lower in the league. So that's quite an interesting two clubs for that to be involved in that. I think because firstly, Nottingham Forest have a very healthy relationship with Crystal Palace. Those multi-club ownership groups have been involved in quite a lot of transfers together. So,
Yeah.
But it seems as though that might not be the case now. That's quite an interesting dynamic, I think. And then obviously Brighton, apparently it's a rivalry. I'm not being, I mean, who am I to say who they should and shouldn't hate, but it's their rivals that would benefit from this.
This supports your point of there's not many clubs around them, so the nearest rival is about an hour's drive.
Yeah, I think the nearest London club, I might be wrong. Like my knowledge of London isn't fantastic, but I believe it's Millwall. Millwall, I think.
That sounds about right to me. I think you're right.
It's that part of London, but there's not loads of clubs around Palace. So that's the first part. And lastly, before we have a little bit of a break, Scott, do you think UEFA are right to enforce this rule? Or does it feel wrong for you?
No, enforce it. I mean, I get the only sort of saving grace I could say for Palace is you don't know you're going to be in that position until you beat City in the cup final. Or at least if you then get to the final or the semis, you might want to start thinking about these kind of things. But if the rule isn't going to be enforced, then you may as well just fucking get rid of it altogether. So my sympathy is limited.
I agree to an extent. So I do have sympathy for the fans because it's completely out of their hands.
Yeah, shit for the fans.
And it is shit because it'd be class being in the Europa League. But at the same time, I don't like multi-club ownership, and I don't like the fact that you could have a situation where Lyon play Palace on the last day of that massive group, and they both need a draw to get into the last 30. I just think it's sketchy as. So I think the rules are fair. I kind of hope. I suppose the best case scenario, in my view, is for Textor to sell his shares. And it's a completely new owner going in there. And for me, then that's fair enough. But I suppose we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's one of those. And if you're an owner, you'll buy up all the clubs until it becomes a problem. And then you just ride it till the wheels fall off, don't you? Which looks like is probably what he's going to do.
Yeah, right. We'll leave it there for now, and we'll be back in a minute.
We will.
And we are back. So, let's talk a bit about the football that's been going on, Scott. So,
yeah,
you're the one with actual football happening. So, we touched base. We didn't touch base. We had a podcast last week, and we talked about your two upcoming games. And I think we said that we're expecting a pretty good performance against LAFC, and we thought that the Flamengo game might prove to be a tough game.
Yeah.
And it looks as though it's going to kind of how we expected, Scott. But firstly, tell me about the LAFC game.
The LAFC game was, we called it spot on, mate. We called it absolutely spot on. It was a team, you could tell that there was a bit of malaise amongst the Chelsea players. It was always one of those. It was mostly comfortable. Robert Sanchez gave the ball away a million times. Pedro Neto ran his dick off. It was pretty much business as usual for Chelsea. So the LAFC game was fine. I wasn't really ever concerned. It was 1-0 for a lot longer than I would have liked. It took us quite a long time to break through and get the second goal.
One big takeaway was our prediction on the starting 11 was pretty off the money.
So it was massively off.
Yeah, and obviously we recorded that a matter of hours before the game, didn't we? So by the time it went out, we all that was happening was people just hearing how wrong we were in the past.
Yeah. We were fucking mugged off in real time by Enzo Maresca.
Yes, we were completely. Although I was surprised that Liam Delap didn't start, but we'll get into your striker situation in a minute. But perfect. So LAFC, I think you played rather well. I do love, before we move on, I do love watching Enzo Fernandez with that late run into the box. Centre midfielders do not do that anywhere near enough. It is not a surprise. Every goal he scores is almost the same. That late run into the box, attacks the ball with either head or foot. Nowhere near enough midfielders do that these days. And
Agreed.
And he's almost that good at that he can be completely anonymous in games. Does that, and it's Enzo steps up to help the team. It's like
yeah, I know what you mean, and it's weird because we bought him, and the perception was he'd be this like deep lying playmaker, pulling the strings on the ball all the time, and I think Graham Potter did that with him a little bit, but I think the physicality of the league kind of caught up with him in his second season, and now he's carving out a bit of a niche for himself. He's now finding a way to become effective, whether that is being the maestro, the Andrea Pirlo, or taking a leaf out of Frank Lampard's book and getting on the end of the moves. So
it's it reminds me a little bit of Declan Rice, but it's probably a little more advanced. But it's a similar thing, I think, where he's kind of almost remolded his play for a new environment. I don't think he was necessarily this player originally, but he's kind of adapted, similar to Rice as at Arsenal, I think.
Yeah, agreed. And I think you can see it in just his shooting. When he first joined Chelsea, the one thing that really pissed me off with him, his shooting was terrible. His ball striking was fucking wank. But he has since massively improved it, especially look at his goal against Spurs when we beat them at, they'll say White Hart Lane then, whatever it's called now, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Again, a brilliant first-time strike that he was not getting on the end of properly or connecting with the same time last season. So you can tell he's working on that. It's quite an intentional shift in his game. So fair play to him for finding a way.
Okay. Then later in the week, Friday night, live on DAZN, Flamengo.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that game then.
So Flamengo, it was really frustrating, in some ways not surprising. So the first thing I want to say about that game is that I thought the team selection was really, really bizarre. So we had Reece James in a central midfield position, and Malo Gusto was part of the attack. It was a weird one because Maresca confirmed after the game that he was trying something new for the season ahead. He was basically tinkering. And you've got this sort of these dueling camps of Chelsea fans saying, it's a fucking Club World Cup game. We need to win this. Why you try what you're doing experimenting in our toughest game? But then you've also got the other side of he doesn't really have any other time to do any trials or testing or tweaking of the system because this is our pre-season.
Before you carry on, it's quite interesting you say that because I noticed Cucurella doing something similar. Cucurella seems to be adopting quite central positions all of a sudden. So I think there is something in that. But carry on, sorry.
Yeah, and the difference is Cucurella has proven he can do this inverted fullback role really well, and he's almost given a bit of free reign attacking wise because he cropped up with a lot of goals last year.
Ben Chilwell did it early doors for you, but almost like it's not quite an inverted because they're taking up almost central attacking midfield positions. Your fullbacks,
yeah, it's weird. It's a weird.
Ben Chilwell did it under Potter, I think, as well.
He did a little bit, yeah, and I think that's when we started to see the beginning of the end of Chilwell because in attacking positions he was shocking. I think that's what led to his downfall. I think that and his paper ligaments don't help him either.
Yeah,
but yeah, so the team selection was weird. So you had like a lot of people were expecting Andre Santos to get some game time. He didn't, and we'll get into the whispers and rumors around that later. So the team selection was weird, but we controlled the game from almost the first hour also, basically until we conceded. The goal that we scored was born out of Pedro Neto being a bit of a pest, doing what he does best. So that I was happy with that. And Liam Delap looked okay. He was feisty. He was putting in challenges. Everything was all good. And then we basically got done by two set pieces by falling asleep at the back post. Malo Gusto was probably at fault for the second one. And then a minute after we conceded the second goal, Nicholas Jackson comes on in less than 3 minutes. He's given a straight red card for an absolutely horrendous challenge, I have to say. It was really bad.
Yeah. We'll split these into two because I want to talk about both them things. First of the two goals he conceded almost in quick succession, it reminded me a little bit of like a Champions League away night where you conceded a goal and the crowd was so fired up, the team was so fired up, it almost became inevitable that you were going to take a step back and you were well under it all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And the whole complexion of the game changed. So I felt like it could be quite a good lesson for you. But do you think the lack of experience in your team, when literally you're playing against Thiago Silva there, someone who, you know, in your opinion, was an absolute stalwart. Like he was someone that all the team could look up to, and it was brilliant. You don't really have that now. So do you think that this was a little bit of an issue in those kind of moments, that youth that you've got?
Somewhat, but I also think the biggest factor behind how we kind of capitulated in that game was more down to I think you could tell which team was at the end of their season and which one was bang in the middle. One team had kind of gone through all the hard work from Chelsea's perspective has been done. Like, we've got the qualification for the Champions League. We've achieved what we needed to achieve. This is kind of, we want to win it, but also if you sat all those players down, and probably the manager as well, and no judgment on your answer, they'd probably say, yeah, we'd rather not fucking do this because this is right at the end. We'd rather have some time off and a bit of a break. Whereas Flamengo, I think their season, I think this is bang in the middle of their season.
Right, slap bang in the middle, yeah.
Yeah, so they are fully, the absolutely firing on all cylinders. They're probably the best team in Brazil as well at the moment. So it was, and like you hinted to it, the crowd was basically a home game for Flamengo. It was ridiculous. So that
it was more than that. It was like it was like when West Ham played in Prague in that Conference League final, where it was just like
it's
like four away. It was like 4 away stands.
It was ridiculous, and I think coupled with the fact that Flamengo fans seem to have it in for Chelsea. I think I might have missed some sort of Twitter rivalry or something, but Flamengo.
Oh yeah, I did see the stuff after the game about the Flamengo Twitter account. I mean, I saw it post. I don't follow the Flamengo Twitter account, but I saw it after because I'm 2 days behind on news generally.
Got in the algorithm, didn't it? And I think that you had, and there's that, and then you couple in the fact that for these South American teams, which we'll probably touch on, they're all taking it super serious, and they're giving all the big European teams that they come up against a fucking torrid time. So I just think we got done over by a team who wanted it a bit more than we did. Were probably a bit sharper, a bit more mentally focused. A bit of experience might have done us good there, but I don't know. I'm not sure that was the driving factor. It wouldn't have done us any harm, but I still think we were behind the 8 ball in that.
Okay,
point.
We'll come back on who you think might win the tournament at the end, but let's talk about Nicholas Jackson then. Brain dead.
Yeah.
Now, I remember at the back end of the season that red card he got away at Newcastle, was it? And Maresca said that he owes the team after that. Like, he'd let these teammates down and he owes the team in the Europa Conference League final.
Mm-hmm.
What do we think now? How many chances does he get? Particularly with Liam Delap now in and around the team.
It's such a shame because in the first game, he got the assist for the first goal against LAFC. And you saw a side of him where you think, you know what, with a bit of competition breathing down his neck now, this should now be the time where you actually see a better version of him. Because I think he's a bit frustrating, but overall, you signed a player for 30 million quid who's just turned 24, and he's gone back-to-back double figures in the Premier League. Whichever way you want to cut it, that's what he's done. So I don't think it's the kind of talent that you give up on necessarily, but in those big games, like I was at the Newcastle game, and you could just see, you felt the energy leave the away end because we were doing quite well in that game, although we were 1 behind at the time. We were right in it.
Oh, it's St. James's Park now is the definition of tough away day. Like you're not going to get anything there. Yeah.
No, awful place to go. And then both the consistency amongst these two incidences, there's no need for either of them to happen. In the Newcastle game, I think it was Dan Burn, stares at him for a good couple of seconds and just fucking forearms him for no reason. And in this one, he'd just come on the pitch.
He's got a red mist. He clearly has a red mist. Moment of madness, and he sees like I was watching it, and as soon as it happened, I remember saying to the wife, "I'm like, he's off here. That's a red straight away." Like it was such an obvious red. And look, I mean, I'm not pretending I'm a professional football player anywhere near that standard, but I've been sent off in a similar situation when you've come on, you're losing, the other team's fired up. And you're coming on, you're trying to impact the game, and the energy gets to you too much I was sent off in a similar way. So I know I'm able to understand why it's happened. But the problem is that going to happen again? Is it going to keep happening in these big games?
Yeah, and it's so interesting that we touched on this because Ben Jacobs was doing a bit of a. I think he was doing a Twitter space and he was talking about this.
Who's Ben Jacobs? Just for people that don't know,
he is. I'm not quite sure what publication he works for, but he's slowly becoming the third transfer guru of Twitter. So you've got David Ornstein as the king, you've got Fabrizio Romano as the second in line, I would say, because everything that Ornstein says typically happens. Fabrizio is a bit more sketchy, but Ben Jacobs, to be fair, he's actually come. A lot of stuff he's called this summer has been absolutely on the money so far. So I don't know. He's got a new source somewhere. He's got some new moles in certain camps. He's doing quite well.
Fingers in pies.
Yeah, lots of fingers in pies. Yeah, but he was doing a Twitter space and he was talking about how so Jackson gets sent off against Newcastle and misses the rest of the season. If it's difficult to say, but had we not gone on to qualify for the Champions League, you could argue that decision to leave us without a centre forward for the last 2 games of the season could have cost us about 100 million quid. And then
I think there is an alternative universe where that would have happened.
Exactly. And also in the Club World Cup, I think if we get through the group stage, I think we get about 10 million quid. And again, then there's a further 80 million on the line. And he's going to miss everything until, I think if we make it that far, he could be available for the semi-final. So it's these kind of things where you've been at the club now. This will be your 3rd season. You're meant to be the main man. It's Liam Delap's job to get rid of you, not the other way around. And you're not acting like you're the number one guy. And I think talent-wise, I wouldn't want to see us get rid of him, but I think you've got to start asking serious questions about his mentality and can he actually be a proper team player and not fuck it up for the rest of them.
Fair enough. So you mentioned South American teams performing quite well. Maybe
very well.
Question marks around whether the European teams are taking it seriously. There's only really Atletico Madrid that probably may not qualify. My tip to win. Well done, Liam. So who do you think's winning this tournament, Scott, from here?
Ooh, it's an interesting one. I'd love to be a bit edgy and put an outside bet on like a Flamengo or a Botafogo or something, or Palmeiras, but I still think you're going to see one of the European big boys win it. I think PSG will go through. I don't think they're going to win their group now by the looks of it.
No.
But I still think PSG will. They're the best team in Europe, and ergo they should, in theory, be the best team in the world. So I still think that quality is going to shine through. I think you touched on it, though. It's going to come down to how seriously they take it. And you've got Chelsea players will be looking at the game on Tuesday night or Tuesday morning, thinking, if we just lose this, we get to go to Dubai. Like we can go on holiday. Like, do we just fuck it off? Like, do we care? So I think there's going to be an element of that, but I think PSG is still going to win it.
Okay. No, I
what do you reckon?
I think I agree. I think not necessarily PSG, but I do think that the European sides will wake up a little bit as this tournament progresses. Yeah. And I think, in my view anyway, that Bayern probably will win it. I think it'll be one of PSG, Bayern, or City. I think City are taking this very seriously on the quiet.
I keep forgetting City are in it. yeah, they are as well.
That's what I mean. They're going very much under the radar. I think Man City, but I think they're really pushing for this. That's certainly the feeling I get whenever I hear Pep talking about it. I think he knows that it might breathe some confidence into that team going into a tricky Premier League season.
It's a big season ahead for them, isn't it? So any momentum that they can take in, I think he'll be desperate for it.
So while we're touching on the Premier League, Scott, a couple of transfers have happened while we've been away for the week. So
they have.
A lot of it's focusing on Liverpool, I would say. They seem to be the story of the transfer window, really. They've completed really a monumental deal in Florian Wirtz. That's like a world level transfer. That's up there with the big transfers in history, really. How do you think he'll get on?
I don't know. I've seen this show before. You know, talented German dynamo playmaker with a name ending in Ertz from Bayer Leverkusen, joining the Premier League for a big money with massive expectation. And it didn't quite go to plan. So
that's not the view of all the podcast contributors.
It isn't, no. But it is. It isn't, but it is the view of me.
Yes.
I don't know, to be quite honest with you. I've heard Florian Wirtz, he's been on the scene for a long time. He's still only 22, I think. He's still only quite young. But he's been around for a while in European football. I've seen a lot of players come from the Bundesliga and really struggle in England and really find it tough. And I think with the money and like the expectation and the praise being heaped on him is endless. So I do wonder that it's a big weight on his shoulders. Well, he might not give a shit. He might actually be quite cool with it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of expectation, and I think the bar is, unfortunately for him, going to be very high. If he scores 10 goals, which is actually a really respectable return for your first year in England, I'm going to be like, well, that's not. You don't pay 100 million quid, 150 million quid or whatever it is for 10 goals.
The price tag plays such a part. I mean, we touched on this last week. We talked about Darwin Núñez. He's seen as a flop, really, Darwin Núñez, but he has a goal every other game, an assist in every 4 for Liverpool.
Yeah.
In the league. That's his league record. That's not taking it.
That's not bad, is it?
No, it's not bad. If you pay 50 million for that, you're happy. Yeah. But yeah, so the price tag does play a big part in perception. I agree. Okay, fair enough.
What do you on Wirtz though? I think you may have probably seen more of him than I have. What's your take on him in terms of as a player and how you think he'll adapt to England?
I think he's a fantastic player. In terms of adapting to England, I'm interested to see how Liverpool will use him, because that's a part of the pitch that Liverpool don't occupy too much at the moment. And I think Liverpool have been very interested in the transfer window, because it looks to me like they're future-proofing themselves a little bit. I think they're looking at Man City and thinking, we don't want to be in that position. So they've boxed off with the biggest issues, which was the renewal of the Salah and Van Dijk's contract. They lost Trent Alexander-Arnold, but I think they're learning from that. Yeah. And I think what they're trying to do is get the next generation in now. And it's not necessarily about this idea of kicking on while you're ahead, which I think is I don't necessarily think it's about that. I think it's more about, how do we replace Salah now?
Yeah,
like, we don't want to be in that position again where we could lose Salah. And I think that's where they're looking at Wirtz, and they're looking at changing to do that. So it'll be really interesting, I think, because they don't necessarily play that position at the moment. I think Cody Gakpo's tried to do it, but he's not. They've been lacking, I think, on that other side since Mane left.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see. I think he's a fantastic footballer, though. Really, really good player. And the Premier League will be better for having him. The other one is Gay, which I think is a really interesting link, I think, because they've got, in my view, again, this isn't a view shared by another podcast contributor, but I think that Van Dijk and Canate represents the best centre-back partnership in the Premier League. So Gay won't be cheap. I know he's potentially running down his contract. Is the news by your mate, Mr. Jacobs, actually.
Yeah.
In the last 48 hours, that Gay has indicated he will run that contract down because he's got interest from abroad.
Yeah.
Barcelona, I think, potentially next summer, if he doesn't get his transfer this summer.
I think
most clubs should be looking at him. Do you think that's a good move for him, Gay? Do you think Liverpool's a good move for him?
Yes, I do, because I think the one thing I like about Mark Gay is that he's a natural leader. And again, I think you hit the nail on the head about the replacing people before they need to be replaced. So I think he's the natural Van Dijk successor. I don't even think he's the Canate successor, because you're going to need a captain when Van Dijk isn't there. And Mark Gay, he's that.
Bang on. I keep forgetting about Mamardashvili. I keep forgetting that that's a transfer. Yeah. And he's I believe, linked with Leeds on loan, I think.
I thought that I was convinced that the deal was that Alisson was going. And
that's what I thought. Thing, yeah,
but obviously not, because he's sticking around at least another year. But that's a tricky one for him. I think a loan is good because you're not going to get many chances to play as a sub keeper. A sub, if you're the next right back of the future, you might get some game time. But Mamardashvili is going to be a bit.
I suppose the only thing with that loan is I wonder whether he thinks he's better than it, and I wonder. For me, it could be is. You might. Well, yeah, you need a goalkeeper. Now, I don't think Liverpool would loan you a goalkeeper.
No,
they might do. They might do, but you might get Mike Maignan, and Mamardashvili then to Milan would make a bit more sense, I think, Because,
Agreed.
but saying that, playing for Leeds, that'd be quite fun. I imagine playing for Leeds.
If I was Liverpool, I'd want him in the Premier League for when the day comes when he takes the number 1 shirt.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but Gay to Liverpool. I'm gonna say Gay to Liverpool. I think it's a great move for him, and I think anybody who now needs a centre half should be looking at him because he's proven it time and again that he's absolutely quality. And it's a shame that we let him go at the time, but and I think we've been linked back with him as well. But at the moment, if Liverpool come knock him, that's where he's going. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah, Frimpong and Kirkez as well, and Alexander Arnold and Robertson replaced. It is clever. It is clever what they're doing, but we'll not dwell on them two. They're pretty straightforward. Yeah. But just in terms of transfers, I think the big story that's continuing to develop, and it's something that's been talked about all year, but it's something we talk about daily, I think, in our WhatsApp group is, Scott, why haven't Arsenal bought a striker yet?
It's pretty staggering, isn't it? I wouldn't mind in previous years, you can look at it and go, you know what? It's a dead market. There isn't really anyone who you could realistically get. I think maybe a couple of years ago, if you needed a centre forward, you had like, okay, Haaland's good, but he's £1 billion. Mbappe's good. He's £1 trillion. And then that was pretty much it. Everyone was pretty much average. And Osimhen wants, a fucking apartment on the moon and £1 million a day. So you can't have him either. But now you've got 2 strikers who are, one of which is begging for a move and basically twerking for Arsenal, specifically by the looks of it, in Victor Gyökeres, who has an obscene goal record in the Champions League as well. And Arsenal just, I don't know. I don't know if there's like some internal disagreement on why you don't just say because I think the Sporting want like 60 million euros, I think, or 65 million euros.
Well, I mean, this is a debate going on in Sporting, isn't it? Because I think there was an alleged gentleman's agreement, which Sporting are now turning around going, what are you on about?
Yeah, the famous for being honoured those gentlemen's agreements.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. I'll never get my head around that. Like only in football does that kind of thing exist. But anyway, yeah. So you're right, Gyökeres, and then Benjamin Sesko as well. That's the other striker that they're linked with.
Yeah,
I'm not hot on that one, if I'm being honest.
I don't know what it is. I mean, I've seen some clips and some highlights of him, and he looks fairly tasty. But again, it's Bundesliga. Everyone looks good there. I could probably do a job in Bundesliga. Timo Werner looked like fucking Ronaldinho in the Bundesliga.
Well, it's funny you say this, right? Because this is my theory about it. And it is a bit of a theory. And I'm not saying this to upset Martin. But my theory on the Arsenal situation is that they don't actually want either of these. That Arsenal are looking for a signing that comes in and delivers the league. They're looking for that. We've made this analogy before, that Van Persie to United signing that takes them from second to first.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're convinced that Gyökeres or Sesko, either of them are that. The only one who is that is Isak, and he's not available.
Yeah. Not unless you're willing to move heaven and earth and break every PSR rule and just think, fuck it, we'll take the PSR hit in a couple of years when we have to file the books. And we'll have the Premier League in the cabinet by then.
And I think it's that simple. I think Liverpool, I think the Wirtz money was Isak money to begin with. That's long been my view. Yeah, I think that Newcastle qualifying for the Champions League changed what would have been, I think, a huge transfer saga this summer. And because I think PSG would have entered the race. I think it would have been everyone in Europe, apart from maybe Real Madrid, because they've got Mbappe. I think everyone else in Europe would have been pushing for Isak. But
you've said it before, and you're right, that he is the best striker on the planet at the moment.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody touches him for form, for how much he brings to a team. And you can say Haaland, but I'd rather have an Isak than a Haaland.
Haaland's a fantastic goal scorer, but Isak is a fantastic goal scorer and a fantastic footballer as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Unbelievable footballer. But yeah, okay. If I admit, obviously, I don't want to go into. I'm not. We're not Alex Crook. I don't want to go into this in too much detail of transfers. Is there anything that I've missed there that's noteworthy, Scott?
I don't think there's anything. Well, funnily enough, speaking of like transfer gurus, I saw Fabrizio Romano had a bit of an embarrassment referring to Chelsea's goalkeeper situation. He said on his podcast, Chelsea are re-looking at the goalkeeper situation over the last day or two. They're looking at Maignan again. They might go back in for him. They're looking at a few of the names. So it's one to watch. Like, it's a hot thing to watch, he called it. And then 5 minutes later, he tweets out, Chelsea are happy with their current goalkeeping options and are not looking to make a move for Mike Maignan again in the window.
So he's obviously had the phone call, hasn't he? He's obviously had a phone call straight away
Yeah.
from Chelsea.
Yeah, like fucking correct this immediately. And everyone on Twitter's called him out and said, didn't you just say this on your podcast? And he's basically just pretended that never happened.
Well,
So
I mean,
think there's some cloak and daggers, there's some smoke and mirrors going on with.
both things can be true, can't they? Both things can be true. I don't. They're obviously not happy with the goalkeeper situation because they were in for Mike Maignan. So that I struggle to believe that situation changed because they didn't get Mike Maignan. All of a sudden, no, we don't want Mike Maignan. What you know about? Like, it's almost a bit of it's a bit of gaslighting, I think. But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll talk about my club for a bit. So Bolton have been busy in the transfer market. So
who have you brought in? I know County have been busy.
Sam Dolby has been brought in. Your mate, the goalkeeper, who I keep forgetting his name of, from Chelsea.
One of our many goalkeepers, as Luke will be happy.
Yes, one of your million goalkeepers in the goalkeeper. Speaking of the Chelsea, there was a good little link up there. The Chelsea goalkeeper situation. I missed it anyway. Teddy Sharman Lowe. Yes, that's it.
The one. Yeah,
I didn't even look at that then. I know I've been looking over at my research, but I actually remembered that one while I was doing it. And the midfielder, I can't remember what his name is, but he's quite a tough tackle midfielder. So we've also it's people that have left the club as well. So we've sold this week Aaron Collins, our top goal scorer, player of the year last season, has gone to NK Dons in League Two. Staggering move for him. I think Bolton are looking to restructure the squad, so they're looking to change the way that we play. It could often be that your forward is your best player. That's not a shocker of a thing to see at a League One football club. So, to restructure the team, you will lose that player. So I think Bolton were happy to recuperate what they paid for him 2 years later.
Yeah,
but I'm shocked he's gone to League Two. He was linked with some top end League One and potentially even lower end Championship moves. So to see him drop down to League Two is quite a shock, really. But we don't have to play against him, so that's quite nice, because he would definitely score if he did.
100%. Your old captain's at the door as well, isn't he?
Yeah, Ricardo Almeida Santos has gone to Swansea in the Championship. Good luck to him. I'm not convinced that he will do well, if I'm honest. It's
a big step up, that, isn't it?
I've never been his biggest fan. I think he has a very shallow skill set of really good at very good at very limited things. And so, for example, his one-on-one defending and his recovery defending are brilliant. So he's fantastic at that. Other things,
but not much else.
Yeah. So he's not fantastic on the ball. He's a liability. I would go that far, to be completely honest. When towards the back end of last season and beginning of this, teams were essentially setting pressing traps for him being on the ball. And we did not. And exactly. And Ian Evatt would not react to that. That's the reason he ended up getting sacked, in my opinion, because he refused to change, despite a glaring weakness that was costing him. But I do wish him well. He served Bolton really well.
He's been there a while, hasn't he? He was there for a few years.
5 years. I hope I'm wrong. I genuinely hope he does well in the Championship, and he has. I'll be honest. I'd be surprised.
Yeah. On League One, I find it, having more closely followed a League One team recently. Well, League started when it was.
Well, you're a sort of a hobby League One fan now, aren't you?
Yeah, I'll dip my toe into the Stockport County pool every now and again, and we've made some really odd moves. I think, like you touched on one there, like Fraser Horsfall, who was captain, I believe, left. He was County's basically best centre half. And we offered him a contract, and the owner came out and said, well, Fraser's mulled it over, but he's decided to accept a really big offer elsewhere. So I thought, maybe like a Championship club, maybe some random Saudi club has offered him something. He's gone to Blackpool, which is the same league, and who are much shitter than County. And I really don't understand why he's done that, because County are going to be looking to push on again to get promoted. So I don't see why he'd leave that, unless he's just got deeper pockets than County do. But yeah, that was a really strange one.
I mean, Stockport have a decent budget behind them.
Yeah,
I'd be surprised it's anything other than wages. I mean, I don't know where's Horsfall from. This can play more of a Horsfall. Sorry,
that's actually a great question.
This plays more of a part in lower leagues than it does in the Premier League. In terms of where they're from, he's Huddersfield, so Stockport was close to Huddersfield, so he was much closer to home there. So they're neither that far away. So
weird. One of them, you never know what's going on in someone's life that makes them decide that they want to move to Blackpool. I don't know why. Sorry, Blackpool fans, but I don't know why anyone would want to do that. But yeah, it was a weird one. So yeah, County doing a bit of, and that's something else I'm getting used to following a team in the lower, I guess the lower leagues, I guess you can call it, is the squad turnover is way more frequent than I found it really odd that players are constantly in and out the door. And I'm like, I watched him last year; he was good, and then we fucked him off because it's just the 1 year contract is just way more common.
I know the contract lengths, Scott. I know you're used to seeing double figures really at Chelsea, but like for example, when Bolton signed Sam Dolby, everyone was shocked to see it was a 4 year contract. That is so rare at this level. Like,
Chelsea wouldn't get out of bed for that, would they? Chelsea, it's not 9 year.
But yeah, exactly. Well, you're very rare to see even things go. 3 years is usually like a marquee signing. You sign them on 3 year terms.
Yeah.
Because essentially, you're quite right. Everything can change so quickly. New managers get sacked a lot faster. There's a lot less invested in these squads, so they're much easier to change. So, like, thing is, when let's say Chelsea, for example, we joke about what that squad's worth and what they've paid to put it together, but that is ultimately true. So to change the results on the pitch, there it is a lot harder to change the squad than it is at Bolton. So Bolton have completely ripping up their team from completely this summer. It's very hard to do that at Chelsea because you've got players like Enzo Fernandez who are 120 million or whatever it was. And this isn't a look at what Chelsea played for Enzo Fernandez conversation. It gives you an example. It's much harder. It's easier to change the manager and hope for a different result.
Yeah, than try and recoup 120 million as opposed to,
Yeah, and especially with the wage element as well, because you've got to pay up the wages, haven't you? I mean, the loyalty bonuses that they're all tied up in now. So everyone forgets that about football nowadays. But signing on fees aren't as high anymore, are they? There are a lot of it's now instead of loyalty bonus, isn't it?
Yeah, incentive based contracts.
Yeah,
that's one thing I think Liverpool have done for the good of football is pay players more the better that they do. It's not a bad concept, is it?
No. I mean, I know we joke, but if you look at the way Liverpool have been run this sort of last 10 years, they've been fantastic, really, in terms of
can't knock them as much as I would like to.
They had malaised as a club. They weren't comparable to Man United, but now you could sit here and argue, are they the biggest club again in England? Again, Liverpool. I'd say probably not still, but if you had that conversation 10 years ago, it wasn't even close. Whereas now, I think you could make a solid case for Liverpool being the biggest club in England again.
I agree, mate. How do you think Bolton will be getting on this year? Because I know last year you were heavily tipped to go up, didn't work out. Do you think it's going to be? You think you're going to be up there again?
Too early to say. I'd give it another few weeks. Let's see what the team looks like in a few weeks. I'm encouraged though, because this time last year, if you remember, I was like, nah, you can tip us all you want. We ain't going up. I was
you did.
I was firm on it. I'm a bit more encouraged because it looks like we've got the semblances of a plan in terms of building a squad together. But let's see what we look like. Although it's not too long, first week in August is our season start. So,
bloody hell.
Exactly. Pre-season starts very soon, so we'll see. We'll see.
Never ends, does it, mate?
No, it does not. Right. I think we've covered everything there, Scott. So
I think we have.
Wonderful. Thank you once again, Scott. Been thank you for doing your research on Crystal Palace. Not easy because it's not been well covered. We've said this, it hasn't been well covered. Maybe it's an issue with sports media. Obviously, a lot of these clubs now doing their own media, so it's getting smaller, the amount of journalists that are out there. So maybe there isn't the length and breadth. Maybe a topic for the future. Don't know.
Yeah.
We're still at the multi-club ownership yet. One day we'll come around. One day we'll do it. But Scott, if people want to find us, where can they find us?
You can find us at fixingfootballpodcast.com, where all of our social channels, you can follow us on everything.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, if you're still listening at this point, you've kind of already found us. But tell other people as well. You know, you'd be surprised that we're getting some serious, since we've gone YouTube, Scott. We're getting some serious numbers now. You know, we're becoming serious players in this. We're the new Jacobs. We'll be the fourth one to enter that.
That has to be like the best gig to come up with. Is like be the transfer guy, get paid to just say shit about transfers that probably won't happen. Most of them probably won't even happen. You can just make stuff up and tweet out, you know, innocuous updates like advancing negotiations, serious talks planned, loads of alarm emojis. We need to start doing that shit.
Talks progressing. That's all. Yeah. Is it meeting scheduled next week? And there's loads of that in there. I agree. That's one of the top 3 best gigs. I'd say number 1 best gig is third choice goalkeeper. That's definitely the best gig in football. And second, I think, is retired ex-pro like Lou Macari, John Aldridge type, just getting on the after dinner circuit, just being a professional pisshead. And
telling all the stories from the changing room back in the day.
Other players that did all amazing things, and you were just there. But anyway, so fantastic, Scott. Please like, subscribe, comment, particularly comment. Only if they're nice things, though. Say nice things about us.
Yeah.
I read them, and they do hurt my feelings when you say nasty things. Although, one thing I have noticed about the internet since I've lost weight is that instead of just being a whatever now, before I was a fat whatever when people were calling me names on the internet, whereas I don't get the fat bit anymore, which is, you know, so there's like an inverted compliment in there. I don't know.
Maybe, mate. It's a step towards being a compliment.
It is. It is.
So
next week we should be back to Martin presenting, but if not, I will be here. Scott, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Anytime, mate.
Goodbye, everyone. Farewell.
See you later.